Hello everyone, welcome to these self-knowledge lectures. Today we're having lecture number 32, and in this lecture we are going to talk about the radical change. So let's start and let's see what would be the objectives of this lecture. The objective of today's lecture will be that we learn when it starts and how to make a radical change through self-observation. We are going to achieve, if we put this into practice, a gradual but permanent change because it will be a root change. Many times we want to change internally by making external changes. However, we see that we don't achieve it and that we really don't know how to change. But today we are going to see how we are going to achieve this change and what tool is going to help us to achieve it. So let's start, and I will begin by analyzing this phrase with which this lecture begins. And it says, as long as a person continues with the error of believing himself one unique individual, it is evident that radical change would be more than impossible. And why is it like this? Let's see. We think that we are one, but in reality we are many people. Our personality makes us think that we are in a certain way, and we describe ourselves by saying like, I am a good person, or I am an honest person, or well, yeah, I am a bad-tempered person, or I am a shy person, etc. And the I am like this is actually our first obstacle to achieve a change. We have the ingrained concept that we are a certain way, that we are one. And we don't realize that within us we are many individuals, that in our interior we carry many ways of being that we call the I's or the selves or the details of our ego. Each one of these ways of being that we carry inside us has its own particular way of thinking, feeling, and acting. When we are happy, we don't think, feel, and act the same way that we do when we are sad, or when we are angry, or when we are afraid. When we are in love, we don't think, feel, and act the same way as we do when we feel hatred or when we feel jealousy. We can see that we don't feel, think, and act the same when we want to impress others as we do when we are in confidence, in intimacy. So we see that when we say, I am in such a way, we are only identifying ourselves with the I that we like the most, like that we are like most identified with, or the one that we are most proud of, or the one that expressed more frequently in us, or with the one that we are most attached to. What we must start by understanding is that one is not sulky or lazy or good people or responsible or shy, but that one has a sulky way of being, a lazy way of being, a good people way of being, a responsible way of being, a shy way of being, and all of them, and many more, are living inside us. Inside us, actually, we carry all kinds of defects, good defects and bad defects. For example, inside us, we have the alcoholic I. That is like the active pole of one of our many defects. But it turns out that for some reason, let's say because of personality or because of convenience, we don't drink alcohol. And we could believe that we don't have that defect, when the reality is that we have the same defect, but we have it in the other pole, which is the abstemious eye, which is, let's say, like the passive pole. But this eye, like all of them, this abstemious one, has no wisdom, no understanding. Therefore, it is not a virtue. The abstemious usually, this eye usually do is that it criticizes and judges and even feel rejection or repulsion or sorry towards the alcoholic people. And this is because since the repressed eye has not been observed or worked on our interior, there is no understanding, as we haven't accepted that we have it, as we haven't seen and we haven't studied and eliminated the alcoholic pole of the defect inside of us. This eye is still alive. So we don't have the virtue. It is only that we are in the passive pole of the defect. And so we have in our interior multitudes of eyes that move in that duality called good and evil. And all of them have trapped a portion of our consciousness, which is beyond good and evil. Our consciousness is beyond good and evil. Only when we get to eliminate all these ways of being from within us, all our lustful, angry, gossipy, lazy, greedy, envious, proud eyes, all of them, both at one pole and at the other, and we rescue all the trapped consciousness that is actually lying inside of them. There we will be only consciousness. There we will be only one. The initial point of radical change remains hidden as long as the person continues believing himself to be one. We are, made up of 3% conscious and 97% subconscious. And this work begins when one faces oneself and one questions, who am I? And when we start generating within ourselves that longing for self-discovery, if we pay attention to what we feel, what we think, and what we do during the day, we will realize that in a little while we change ways of being many times. Our body is actually just a vehicle where the different defects enter and drive the machine. Our body is like the puppet of our ego, of our defects. And our defects actually fight to take over our machine, creating chaos inside. And each eye watch over its own particular interest in our interior. For example, anger only seeks to run over, to mistreat, or even lose the physical body if necessary in order to satisfy its needs or its needs for violence. Our lust only seeks for satisfying itself, for satisfying or to feel pleasure or to adulterate, etc. And if we don't become aware of that internal multiplicity, we will not be able to achieve a radical change. Then we see that it is only the severe self-observation without escapes of any kind which allow us to verify for ourselves the crude reality that we are not one, but many. So when does the radical change begin? When it will begin when we begin to observe ourselves at every moment. Only with self-observation can we begin to understand for real that we are many. With the self-observation, we are going to pay attention at all times to what is happening in our energy centers, especially in our 5 lower centers, which are the ones that are fallen, that are unbalanced. And they are, our motor center, mental, emotional, instinctive, and sexual center. And this is very important because if we don't observe our defects, we actually cannot eliminate them. And if we are self-observing ourselves in any situation, for example, looking at things on social networks, and it appears something of a morbid sexual nature, it can be something unpleasant even. News about pedophilia or about rape. But if at that moment we are self-observing, we actually can discover how our sexual center has entered into activity, as some eyes of sexual excitement have taken over our sexual center, even though at a mental level we are feeling like rejection or repulsion. In other circumstances, if we are practicing self-observation, we could come to observe a certain anxiety in our instinctive center. And when we observe carefully, we discover that it is a manifestation of, let's say, the eye that wants to smoke, or the eye that wants, or the adulterous eye that is generating anxiety because wants to be with, the other person, and the partner is close, or is about to receive a call, or is receiving messages or whatever. But actually, if at that moment we are self-observing, we can discover the how the instinctive center is actually in activity, because some defects are actually taking our instinctive energy. And on the other hand, we could discover that what is using or misusing our energy is an eye of fear or of worry about something, maybe something that is going to happen. We could get to observe that in us if we actually self-observe. In our emotional center, we could discover an activity under certain circumstances, like when we feel in love and we feel at the level of the emotional center, what people call the butterflies in the stomach, that are nothing more than sentimental and lustful eyes that are clumsily spending our emotional energy. But on the other hand, in the emotional center, we could observe eyes from the other pole, eyes of hatred, or eyes of sadness, for example. And at the level of our intellectual center, we can observe how our mind is, assaulted by eyes like shame, or eyes that idealize people or situation. We can actually, if we observe ourselves, discover this kind of thoughts, or eyes of worry, or eyes of comparison that keep us all the time believing ourselves to be better or to be worse than others, which are, details of our pride. We could also observe at the level of our motor center how some eyes are using our motor energy to, for example, to insult others, or using our sight to leer at others. And these are just a few samples that I have brought you to illustrate what we could discover in ourselves if we practice self-observation. These are just examples. Actually, when we start self-observing, we can get to discover what are the defects that commonly manifest in you. And since we want to change, we must be willing at all times to discover, to observe, and to eliminate all those wrong ways of being that are inside us, so we can actually get to rescue all the consciousness, all the wisdom that is currently hidden or trapped by all our different ways of being. A famous psychoanalyst used to say, one does not become enlightened by imagining figures of light, but by making our darkness conscious. And what does this teach us? That we will not awaken consciousness believing ourselves to be good, believing ourselves to be beings of light, or trying to be good. That is repressing all the perversity within us. But we are going to become enlightened by becoming aware of our own inner darkness, of the evil in us, and eliminating it to rescue the light, the wisdom, the virtues that are the consciousness trapped in each of our psychological defects. So, in summary, how then can we move forward to achieve a radical change? Self-observation in our centers at any time. For example, we are faced with the situation that we have to stand in a long line to enter the bank. Let's put this example. If we are at that situation self-observing, we could get to discover many details of our laziness. For example, in our emotional center, we immediately feel a displeasure, a disliking emotion at having to wait. And our mind, we observe how immediately the complaint and the criticism begins, this constant inner chatter. And our instinctive center, we can observe how anxiety and impatience enter into activity. And in our motor center, we observe those lazy eyes that seek us to lean on something, or that we are changing our feet, or that we begin to spend motor energy with some nervous tick of impatience, such as biting our nails or compulsively moving a foot. And on a sexual level, if we observe ourselves, we will immediately discover how there is a tension, since those nervous tics that lead us to make compulsive and repetitive movements are actually part of our masturbating eye that generates a pleasure to calm us down. All this we can observe, and we there have the opportunity of eliminate each of them in just a moment, in a simple situation, and in relation, in this example, with our defect of laziness. We also observe that our psychological defects are not one either, but are composed of multiple details. So we have to know that we are not going to change magically. We have to observe in ourselves the expression of every detail of defect. We cannot simply come and ask for death to a big eye, for example, to ask for death for the sloth eye, laziness, as this is an eye very big and it is composed of so many details. If we do it this way, if we come and we ask for death only for our laziness, then we will see that the eye just don't die. We continue to be lazy people, and we can get discouraged thinking that actually psychological death doesn't work. But if instead we dedicate ourselves to observing the eye in detail, eliminating every detail of the defect in each of our centers, we will experience the results. We will achieve a real and a radical change. It is not the same, you can see, to try to break a thick rope, pulling it in as a single piece, than opening it and breaking it thread by thread. That is what we are going to do with our psychological defects in order to achieve a radical change. So, to eliminate any I in us, we must do this exercise from moment to moment. Another thing that is important to understand is that this work is not external but internal. Many times we look for external changes, believing that they will generate a change within us. We believe that changing partner or jobs or country or even religion, we will change us internally. However, as what we are, we carry it inside. Whenever we move, we will carry that which creates our reality that is actually inside of us. And we move, yes, but we end up attracting the same circumstances, attracting the same kind of people, and actually making the same mistake. We usually seek inner change by reading books or by following masters or in religions or even at these lectures, but we don't realize that none of this is going to change us. No one can save us from ourselves. Nobody can do this job for us. No one can eliminate our own flaws but us. Only when we decide to apply, to put these techniques into practice in our daily basis, then we manage to verify real and radical changes within ourselves that will lead, to transform our lives. Because when we change internally, then the changes start to be actually reflecting on the outside. And another thing that we must take into account is that just by accepting the idea that we are many because this resonates with us, or because, it's true, one has many different ways of being, or because it sounds logical, but we don't understand the need to study each of them, the need of self-observing incessantly to discover all our different ways of being and eliminate them. It is not going to help us at all. We will simply be deluding ourselves. The mere fact of recognizing that we are many eyes doesn't make us more aware. It doesn't make us at all superior to those who haven't realized that they are many. Only when we begin to observe ourselves at every moment with a true intention of changing, and we start eliminating each expression of the I that we discover in each of our centers, can we really begin to create a radical change in ourselves. And as we discover all our inner degeneration, then we will understand that we are no way superior to anyone. So another thing is that if we discover a defect in ourselves, we must be radical. We must decide not to fit it anymore, not to give it our body anymore so that it can express itself. If not, we will stay for years longing for change and always with the same attitude and always making the same mistakes, even though we have realized that we are many. Whatever defect we discover within us, we must resolve to completely eradicate it from our psychology, to observe more and more details of that defect until we completely eradicate the defect from our inner world. If, on the other hand, we accept that we have many eyes, but we postpone the change, we will never go to achieve a radical change. If what we do with this information that we are receiving today, or with this discovery, is to begin to use the ego as an excuse for our attitudes, and we postpone its study and its elimination, for example, that we begin to excuse ourselves with, yes, it's true, I do this, but that is because I have that defect very strong inside of me. Oh yes, I have to meditate on that defect. Yes, I know, but we never do it. This is actually a sign that we are very, very attached to the crime and that we really don't want to change. We only deceive ourselves if we believe that we are changing just by recognizing that we have many defects. If we want to change, we must start here and now. We must decide with which defect am I going to be radical. And then we must begin to observe ourselves from this very moment and decide that every detail of that defect we discover expressing through our centers, we are going to observe it, we are going to prosecute it, and we are going to eliminate it. We must stop being complacent with the ego. We must stop being permissive and stop giving them our body to express themselves. If this that we are talking today remains only as a theory, actually it is useless. It only works if we apply it and if we begin to observe ourselves from moment to moment. For example, if I am self-observing and I discover that I have such a defect, like arrogance or like bad temper or like shyness or like fear, whatever, I'm observing it. I'm seeing it in detail in myself, in my mind, in my emotion, in the reactions of my body. What should I do? I should immediately ask my Divine Mother, part of my consciousness that is, let's say, in charge of eliminating our psychological defects. We should ask her, mentally, my mother, eliminate this defect for me. Whenever we find this, eliminate this defect and this and this and this, and so we will begin to perceive and to experience the results of this that we are talking today. Because to perceive, to experience, and to comprehend are the most fundamental thing. Only thus it is possible to work consciously in order to achieve a radical change. And to perceive is realizing through self-observation that we have a defect. For example, through self-observation, we manage to perceive that we have a defect of lust or of fornication that doesn't allow us to stop spilling our sexual energy. We realize that. That is, we get to perceive that defect in us. To experience, it is to see that defect in its details. Observe the defect when it wants to express. See the defect in the detail in the different situations on a day-to-day basis, and that is experimentation. We begin to see, for example, how that lust begins to feed through the movies we see, or through certain impressions that we receive, for example, on social networks, and that we don't transform those impressions through psychological death, but we let it enter, let it put into activity our sexual energy. Then, if we get to verify this, if we get to observe that, we achieve experimentation. We achieve experimentation when we begin to observe the eye in the centers and when we start to ask for its elimination. Every day we will find more details of the defect, and if we continue to eliminate them, we will be able to rescue all the consciousness that is trapped by that defect until it is completely eradicated. Also, we are going to take this defect to the meditation, as we saw in lecture number 22. And we are also going to identify that within that defect, there is a sun, there is a consciousness. Every defect has a virtue trapped inside. In the case of this defect of lust or fornication, it has our virtue of chastity trapped. And if we eliminate that way of being, we are going to rescue that which is going to make us change, and that is going to make our life change in a sexual level. And that experimentation is what is called the taste of work that we talk about in the meditation lecture. And every day, every circumstance that we live starts to be an opportunity to discover ourselves, to work on ourselves, and to improve ourselves. And to comprehend, it is when we already eliminate the defect, at least the detail of the defect that we observed, and when we actually went against the defect and we began to eliminate it in the centers, and then we achieve understanding about that defect. And when I, for example, realize that I already comprehend a defect, that I already eliminate the details of the defect, well, when it no longer affects me, when I no longer react, when it no longer bothers me, when I no longer suffer from it, when I am no longer a slave to that defect. And more importantly, I know I already comprehend when I get to see others under the influence of that defect, and I don't criticize them, I don't judge them, because I already rescued the wisdom, the light, the consciousness that the defect had trapped. And we must know that we are going in this path to be tested, that whenever we work on a defect, and you are going to see that, we will begin to see ourselves in situations in which we will be tempted to react. And we will know that we already comprehend when the test comes and we pass it. We don't react. Then we will be, or there we will know that we are already free of the defect, because it can no longer manipulate us. And the idea would be to do this exercise with all the flaws we find in our psychology. And so gradually, and as we progress in this work, we will achieve a true and a radical change in ourselves, in our psychology. So the death of our defects, it's not something to know about with the mind, but to understand with our heart. Knowledge is based on theories and concepts. For example, we know the method for psychological death, or we know the method for spiritual birth, for meditation, for astral projection. We go, we investigate it, we read books, we talk about these topics. And actually that is useless if that knowledge is just only in our minds. Understanding, comprehending is actually different. And the comprehension is obtained when we practice, when we put these things into practice. The comprehension, it is obtained from what is lived, from what is experienced directly. When we have already put the topic into practice in our lives and we manage to see its results, we manage to get the wisdom, then the understanding will come to our hearts. If we put into practice a psychological death and we get to see our defects in details, and we get to eliminate them, and we get to comprehend how this defect worked, how it harmed me or harmed others, etc. Actually, the comprehension of that defect and the virtue are going to come as an understanding, as comprehension to our heart. The same if we are talking about astral projection. And if we just know about astral projection, it's going to be in our mind. But if we put the astral projection into practice, if we actually practice every day until we have the result, until we get to stand up from our bed, and we take a jump, and we remain floating in the environment, and we look at our bed, and we actually see our physical body there sleeping, there we have a comprehension. And that is going to be in our heart. That is the comprehension. And to finish today's topic, I want to talk to you about 3 defects with which we must be radical from the very beginning, since these defects prevent any progress with the other defects, because these three defects, they revive defects. They put our sexual energy in involution and constantly leading us to feed and to create more and more defects, thanks to the creative capacity of our sexual energy. By falling into these three defects, all the effort made in the ongoing death and in reflective meditation and in chastity is actually lost. These three defects are the fornication, the drugs, and the alcohol. From the beginning, we must be radical with these three defects if we want to actually advance in this way. Fornication is, losing sexual energy through orgasm and ejaculation with a partner or through masturbation. By spilling the sexual energy, actually the defects are revived and more are created, since fornication is the way through which we create all the defects that we carry inside us. Therefore, from the very beginning, it is necessary to be radical with everything that leads us to fornication, with pornography, with masturbation, with adultery, etc. In addition, we must be radical from the beginning with drugs, cocaine, heroin, crack, marijuana, also the mystical drugs such as yahe or ayahuasca or peyote, since drugs like alcohol, they revive dead defects, as we saw in lecture number 14, where we were talking about drugs and alcohol. And if we really want to do this work of awakening our consciousness, we must be radical from the beginning with these three defects, because you can prove it by yourself. You can be working on the psychological death. You can be experiencing advances, but once you fall into fitting one of these three defects, you are going to experience how you are going to go back in the work that you already made. So this has been today's lecture. I will leave you with a phrase to meditate, and it is that radical transformation is a definitive possibility that is usually lost when we don't work on ourselves. So it is all about self-observation, discover the defect, see it in its detail, how it is expressed, how it is harming us, and how it is harming others, what virtue or consciousness is actually trapped within it, and start to eliminate every detail. And in less than respect, we will have made a radical change in that defect. But if we only say, my mother eliminates this defect very occasionally and only sometimes we eliminate a detail, actually we will never achieve a radical change. To achieve a real change within ourselves, we must learn to be radical. For the new to be born in us, the old must die. Well, thank you very much to those who connect to these lectures, to those who are interested in these topics, and I wish you a lot of strength in your inner work and in your awakening process. And I take the opportunity to invite you to the next lecture. That will be lecture number 33, where we will be talking about the law of octaves and the law of entropy. In that lecture, we will learn how these two laws of force, how they work, and how to use the law of the musical octaves to ascend in the inner work, and how to combat entropy to prevent that descent on the path to self-realization. So thank you very much. Any questions, we stay here on the page at your disposal, and see you next Sunday. Bye-bye.